All right, it is Tuesday night, December 6th. Just watched the Cavs take care of the Lakers late in that game. Right now, it's the Nuggets versus the Mavs. The Nuggets are home and they're down a couple points in the first quarter. And we're about a little more than 20 games through the NBA season, so I figured now would be a good time to go through a first quarter of the season recap. Quick little recap. I have five major points I want to cover. The first being the reigning champs. Got to talk about Golden State. Second being the future champs, and I'll reveal who I believe that is. The third being the biggest surprise out west. I got a couple teams for that. The fourth being the biggest surprise in the east. And number five, I have a four-way tie for MDTA, which stands for Most Disappointing Team Award. I know, not super optimistic, but I'll save that for the end. But first, we'll start at the top with the reigning champs, the Golden State Warriors. Quick review. We've seen that they struggle on the road. We've seen that they take care of business at home. At the time that I'm recording this, they did lose a close one to the Pacers late last night. Of course, Wiggins was out for that game. And Golden State is who I thought they were. They're a team that kind of coasts through the regular season because they have championship pedigree. And they're a team that's trying to figure out which young guys can play and trying to help Clay catch a rhythm. And there's just a lot going on right now. In the regular season, if anything, the regular season is just a chance to get extra reps for them. They don't take the regular season too serious. Of course, they would like to start off better than they have, but the regular season for Golden State isn't about being the one seed and winning 60 games. That's not the point in those guys' careers that they're at right now. They've already done that type of stuff before. They can coast through the regular season and be a 4 seed and that'll be just fine. I mean, honestly, they could be, if the Warriors are the 7th seed this year, are you really like, oh man, that's terrible or whatever? I wouldn't be too concerned. It's just about them being healthy come playoff time. But of course, when we talk Golden State, there is that major question. Do you trade the young guys to help fill out depth for the team to make a championship run? Or do you keep the young guys and just hope for the best? You know, last season I spent all year saying I was against the two timelines. I didn't like the idea of the Warriors trying to develop these young guys while you got Steph playing out of his mind with an opportunity to win a championship. Obviously, I was proven wrong in the result. They were able to do both at the same time, but it's coming back to bite them this season. I was just a little bit early in my prediction of it biting them. And now they're stuck in an even worse situation because Wiseman's stock is at an all-time low. Moody's stock is probably at an all-time low. Kuminga's looked good the past few games, but you don't really want to trade Kuminga. He's the one who you want to keep out of all of them. So they're in a weird spot right now where they don't really have any trade assets, in my opinion. People keep talking about the Warriors should go get this guy or go get that guy. The guys who they're trying to trade, do the teams want them right now? Their stock is pretty low, and if you try to trade them, if you're Golden State, you're selling James Wiseman stock when it's at its lowest. You're trading Moody stock when it's at its lowest, and I just think this organization is too smart to do such a thing. I never liked the Wiseman pick. I was never high on Wiseman, but at this point, I think you just have to stick it out with him, cross your fingers, and just hope he develops into a good young player. As of right now, I think he's a guy that maybe could be like a 15-7 type of big man, like an offensive big man, like a Enes Kanter who could score with the best of them in the mid-range area for a big man, but defensively just left a lot to be desired. On the boards, he left a lot to be desired and really just wasn't a winning player when you look at it. Like, if you just make it simple, he just wasn't a winner. Enes Kanter wasn't a guy you could really build around. More of a role player who just situationally could get you a couple buckets or something as a backup center. And that's kind of how I see Wiseman right now because he just doesn't like physicality and they're not really using him the right way. There's just a lot of confusion going on with the kid, and I'm starting to feel bad for him a little bit, honestly. And I know if you're a Warrior fan, you're listening to me say these things, and you're like, well, you got to pick a side. You either want to trade the young guys and go for a championship run, or you want to keep them and hope it pans out, and you're losing out on Steph Curry's championship run potentially. But for me, it's kind of a lose-lose scenario in both right now. Like I said, last year I was all for possibly trading those young guys, but right now I just wouldn't. And honestly, I could see the potential that Moody has to be a nice wingman in this league, kind of like a Danny Green, but maybe more off the bounce with it, a little bit more of an offensive player than Green. Maybe not as knocked down of a catch and shoot shooter, and maybe not the all great defender that Danny Green was in his prime, but a little bit more capable of a player offensively, taking a couple bounces off the dribble. And, I see Kaminga possibly being like a Sean Marion if he really locks in and hones in on it. He has a lot of playmaking skills. I talked about Wiseman. So, right now with Golden State, I think the best thing to do is just ride it out. You got to ride it out. Hope Dante DiVincenzo keeps playing good ball. He's a good workhorse for them coming off the bench. Jordan Poole keeps developing, and Clay just catches his stride. Hopefully things click at the right time. They catch the right matchups and they're able to make a playoff run, a finals run. I still think the West is pretty open. The only team right now is the Grizzlies. Last year with the Grizzlies and the Warriors, I knew the Warriors were going to win that series. I wasn't too concerned. You don't really jump out of nowhere and just go on a deep playoff run all the way to the finals. And people thought the Grizzlies were going to do that last year. I just didn't see that. That's kind of how I view the Pelicans now. The Pelicans are going to have to go to the second or third round and lose this year before we can talk about them making a jump to the finals. You just don't make that jump out of nowhere. You got to take step by step throughout the next few seasons to get to that point. But when I look at Memphis this year, now having another year under their belt and Golden State possibly being more vulnerable, I do think this is an opportunity for Memphis to get them. And I do think if the Clippers are healthy and they start clicking at the right time, they can get them as well. But yeah, I just can't throw the Clippers in there just yet. So right now for me, it's Golden State and Memphis coming out west. Denver, they have all the firepower in the world. Even guys like Bones Highland coming off the bench, they have some nice pieces. But at their core, they're always going to have their top three guys on the court: MPJ, Jamal, and of course Jokic. They're going to have three guys on the court who just don't play any defense. And when you have that going on for your team, there's just going to be teams like Golden State when Steph Curry puts Jokic in the pick and roll. There's just going to be teams that are able to get after you because you have a bunch of non-defenders on the court when it matters most. I also don't like just psychologically how the Nuggets are. They wait until it's too late to turn up. They wait until they're down 0-3 or 1-3 in a series before finally realizing, hey, we need to start playing good basketball. They don't have good habits. They're just a team that just, I don't know if they need a new coach or what it is. I actually like their coach as far as the offensive game plan that he runs and the different things that the Nuggets do with the dribble handoffs and stuff. I feel like he has those guys maximizing on their offensive capabilities, but something's just off defensively and just from a mindset standpoint. I don't really know who to blame, but I know I don't take them serious as contenders. The Suns with Chris Paul and that bench, I just don't know if it's enough to hold up. I still would take the Warriors over the Suns. I'd actually probably power rate the Grizzlies over the Suns. Who else is out west? The Pelicans, like I said, I just think that they need another year. So really for the West, for me, like I said, with the Clippers, we just got to wait and see. But for now, it's Warriors, Grizzlies. And when we talk about teams in the West coming out the West and going to the NBA Finals, I ultimately think those teams are going to lose anyway in the finals because the two best teams are in the East, and the future champs, who I'm about to talk about on this next segment, are in the East, and that's the Boston Celtics. I know you guys aren't too surprised by that because of the thumbnail, but the Boston Celtics have been the biggest storyline this season, sitting at 20-5. I bet against them the other night. I took the Raptors at home to beat the Celtics, but the Celtics even pulled that game out. They're just pulling out games that they shouldn't. They're pulling out games with effort when the other team has the rest advantage. They're pulling out games on the road, shooting better than teams who have shooters who are at home. They're just like defying all odds right now. And it really starts with their core guys, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, playing amazing. Both those guys are playing like, Jason Tatum's playing like a top 5 player in the league. He's in the MVP conversation, if not the front runner right now. Jaylen Brown's playing like a top 10, top 15 player in the NBA right now. And what the Celtics have done with Joe Mazzulla, with Rob Will out and with Joe Mazzulla as the coach, They haven't been as great defensively, but they still can get stops whenever. And they're a really, really good offensive team now because they play with so much pace. And I think part of the problem that they had last year was they didn't have real point guard play, and because they were playing so slow. But now they're picking up the pace, and they have Brogdon in the mix. White is playing better. Marcus Smart is understanding his role a little better and getting out the way. He did a good job of that last year, and I think it's only improving now. And these guys just know, hey, we need to run it up and down the floor so that way our best players who are forwards and not necessarily point guards don't have to get trapped and deal with tight spaces trying to dribble around. And to both those guys' credit, I think Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum have both tightened up their handle and done a better job of getting to the basket and finishing with contact. Jason Tatum's also shooting more catch-and-shoot threes this year. He's also posting up more, so he's finding more creative ways to get his shot off and be more effective. Not so much just dribbling a bunch in the same spot like he used to. He used to go in between the legs a bunch and then finally do a sidestep jumper. I think he's realizing that's a low efficiency shot. All in all, this team can just beat you in so many ways, and it feels like they're just on a revenge tour against the whole league, just beating and crushing everybody night to night. This team is just really, they're doing some historic stuff in the regular season. Like, I still think as of right now, they have the highest offensive efficiency rating of all time right now. I want to say it's like 120 or something like that. So what they're doing is remarkable. My only concern when we talk about teams balling that hard in the regular season, you guys remember the 73-9 Warriors. They just didn't have enough gas at the very end of it. And that's my concern a little bit with Boston, but I don't know. Just looking at how they match up against other teams, I think even if they are a little worn out, they're still going to have enough in the tank to get it done. So I love what Boston's doing this season, and they are overwhelmingly the favorite to win the championship right now. I think there's no question about it. If you want to say the Bucks with Giannis, I understand that. We never are going to count out Giannis, Drew Holiday, and Middleton. We're never going to count out Golden State, and there are some other good teams in this league, but overwhelmingly the Celtics should be the favorite right now. Moving on, the biggest surprises out west, I gotta say it's been the Lakers and the Kings. The Lakers have been a surprise to me just because they're sitting now at 8-13. They got off to a really slow start, I believe 2-10 to start the season, but they're actually kind of interesting and they're finding ways to make it work. They're finally working through AD, and it's like the team as a whole pretty much recognizes that AD is the best player on the team, which is good to see because it was like the quiet truth for the past few years. Like when they won the championship in the bubble, AD was the best player on the team. Like he arguably had the best series out of any player on their team, better than LeBron in every single series. Like you could make a case that Anthony Davis probably should have won that MVP award against the Miami Heat, that Finals MVP award. So it's about time that they recognize that they need to work through Anthony Davis. I think Darvin Ham did a good job of just enforcing that and making AD more aggressive and making him more a part of the offense. As far as Russell Westbrook goes, if he keeps playing like this, I'd love to see him win the Sixth Man of the Year award. I'm trying to think who are the top guys for Sixth Man of the Year. I'd love to see the Lakers finish like with a record about 500 or something, and hopefully that's enough for Westbrook to win Sixth Man if he's putting up good numbers and just playing with the high motor that he always plays with. It's like Darvin Ham is finding a way to like have Westbrook use all that energy and all the chaos that he brings not only to his own team but to other teams. He's just a disruptor, and it's like Ham has found a way to kind of put that in a bottle and control it a little bit and use it at the right times. It takes a certain type of personality type to get a Russell Westbrook to buy into what you have going on. LeBron wasn't able to do it. Vogel and AD weren't able to do it. It's nice to see that Ham was able to get through to Westbrook. He obviously was saying the right things to get through to that brother, really connecting with him on a personal level, I'd have to imagine. And sometimes that's the pros of having a former professional player coaching the team. Some of the best coaches in this league right now are former players. When you look at not Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse isn't a former player, but when you look at a Steve Kerr, a Willie Green, Ty Lue, Darvin Ham, like some of the best coaches in this league. And I'm not saying Darvin Ham's one of the best coaches, but some of the best coaches in this league, some of the coaches doing a real good job in this league are coaches who they weren't superstar players, but they were role players who understand schematics and fitting into a system and how everybody makes the team bigger than the sum of its parts. So Darvin Ham is doing a real good job with the Lakers. I like what I'm seeing. I still think Vogel got done pretty shady, but I like what I'm seeing with the Lakers. It's interesting. They're finding a way to make it work, and I think this team could hover around 500, make the play-in tournament, and ultimately get knocked out in the first round. But hey, seeing the Lakers in the playoffs would be interesting nonetheless. The other team out west that's been a shocker to me has been the Kings. I've always liked Mike Brown. I think of Mike Brown as a real good regular season coach. And it kind of feels like what he's doing over there is like what Mark Jackson was doing for Golden State. I'm not saying the Kings are going to win a championship anytime soon, but he's kind of setting them up for success. He's setting up a culture over there. Do I think Mike Brown, you can win a championship with him as the head coach? Honestly, I don't, but I think you can make the playoffs with Mike Brown. I think he can take a team that's struggling and make them interesting. And what he's done with the Kings is he has them playing with pace. He has them doing the point center thing with Sabonis, kind of like the Warriors were doing when he was on the Warrior staff with Draymond playing a point forward, point center role. They got Sabonis doing a lot of that stuff. And Sabonis is such an offensive threat that it's really effective when he does it. They've unleashed Fox by having him work off of Sabonis, and Halliburton's probably the better overall prospect than Fox, but Fox working off of Sabonis is really interesting stuff. And everybody on their team just knows their roles. Fox is putting up similar numbers to Steph Curry in his MVP season, the first MVP season. Fox is putting up like 25, 5, and 5, and he's shooting over 50% from the field, close to 40% from three, over 80% from the line, and he's doing that in like less than 32 minutes a game. So you're getting him in and out of there, just being real productive, handling business. Plus he plays great defense, and then when you sub him out, you're putting in guys like off night. You're putting in guys like Kevin Herter, Malik Monk, other guys that can give you a spark. And at any given moment, somebody on this team can just erupt for 30 points. At the forward position, they have Harrison Barnes. They have Keegan Murray. The rookie's been looking real good. So they just have a team full of guys who are capable offensive weapons. And at any given point, one of those guys erupts for 30 points and is their leading scorer. They do a lot of it by committee. They're just a really fun team to watch. It's cool seeing them light the beam. Growing up as a Warrior fan, I always looked when we played the Kings, even in the years where the Warriors weren't so good, it just felt like we always crushed the Kings. But moving forward, it's like the Kings finally beat the Warriors, and now the Kings are. It's a little bit of a NorCal rivalry. It's starting to get interesting as the Warriors age and the Kings are just young and they're getting better and better. It's going to be real interesting games. And I would love to see a Warriors Kings NorCal playoff series. Like if we were able to get a 3-6 playoff series with the Warriors and the Kings, or the Warriors aren't going to get the 2 seeds, so you're not going to see a 2-7. But just some way, somehow, in the next season or two, if we could get Warriors Kings in the playoffs, that would just be so fun. That's like on my bucket list of things that I would hope for in the NBA season. A Kings Warriors playoff series. I'm pushing for it. As far as biggest surprise out east, the Indiana Pacers. I mean, Benedict Mathurin was my favorite player coming out of the draft. In my ratings, he was number 2 after Paolo. I'm always going to side with the bigger guy. Paolo just looks amazing. But after Paolo, I liked Mathurin a lot. I compared him kind of to Beal and Paul George, like bigger than Beal and more of a capable defender and guy who will bang down low and attack the basket more than Beal, but not as tall and big as a Paul George. And so far, he's been amazing. Halliburton's been amazing for this team. He just creates a bunch of plays, does a lot of smart things, plays like a veteran, like a 10-year pro, and he doesn't turn the ball over. He's just great. And they have solid veterans around them. They have Duarte's going to come back off of injury eventually. Nebhard yesterday was amazing for them. Starting in the place of Halliburton, they beat Golden State. So Indiana has some real interesting pieces, and I've always liked Carlisle as a coach. I'm going to touch on the Mavs later on, hinting towards the next segment. You guys know where I'm going with the Mavs, but Carlisle, he's one of the best coaches in the NBA, and the future of the Pacers looks really bright with Carlisle as the coach, Halliburton at the one, Mathurin and Duarte on the wings, and then Nebhard as the backup guard slash six man. You're always going to get good perimeter play with those guys going forward, led by a real good coach. A real good culture is being created in Indiana right now, and they're having success. And even if they tail off as the season goes along, which I don't think that they will, they might just be a solid team. They might just be a playoff team this year. But even if they are to tail off, even if they were to tail off, they're having good experiences right now, and they're gonna know going forward. Hey, we can win games when we're right. We can win games, and this season is going to be a good building block for them. Do you tank later on and try to get Wemby? Do you try to get an all-star big man, power forward or center to complement the young stars that you have right now? I don't know quite where you go with it. I know Miles Turner and Buddy Hield, eventually you probably move off of them. Not quite sure for what though. But nonetheless, the future of the Indiana Pacers is very, very bright, and they're definitely a team to watch out for. And last but not least, the four-way tie for most disappointing team award. And the four recipients are and this is in no order, the Atlanta Hawks with the Trae Young drama. Trae Young starting to look a little bit like a diva over there. The Atlanta Hawks, they're last in the league. If they're not last, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. If they're not last, they're like second to last, but last in assists, last in passes per game. They're like a bottom two or three team in number of made threes per game. Like this team they just don't have it. They just don't have it. They're not making perimeter shots. They're not swinging the ball around. It's just Trae Young or nothing out there. And when it's not Trae Young, it's DeJounte Murray or nothing out there. And a lot of people were saying DeJounte Murray was going to take Trae Young off of the ball. Trae Young's usage rate is even higher this season. And I never thought DeJounte Murray was going to take Trae Young off the ball. I thought he was going to be the ball handler when Trae Young was off the court. When Trae Young is on the court, the ball is always going to work through Trae Young. I mean, he's the best option on the team, and really when you have a Trae Young type of player, that's really your best option is working it through him. You just wish that they just had a little bit more motion in what they do. They're pretty limited because of their personnel. When you talk about like John Collins at the power forward spot, Capella as center, you look at Murray's inability to shoot the three, even though he has been making a few this season. They're just a pretty limited team, and if they're not buying into defense and they're not buying into the culture that Nick McMillan is trying to instill, this team's just not really going to go anywhere. So the Hawks are definitely one of the most disappointing teams this year. Another team that made the list is the Dallas Mavericks. Luka dribble Doncic. He just doesn't play a winning style of basketball. Very similar to Trae Young. It's funny because they always get compared to each other. They were in that same draft. Who do you draft number one? I mean, Luka's the better player, of course, but Luka doesn't play a winning style either. Jason Kidd comes out today and says that what they're doing with Luka isn't sustainable. I mean, no duh. This is why Carlisle is gone. Carlisle wanted to get the ball into Brunson's hands. Carlisle wanted to get the ball into Porzingis' hands. He wanted Luka to play a little bit differently. He wanted Luka to do some of the things that the Pacers are doing right now. They're playing winning basketball in Indiana. Meanwhile, you just have Jason Kidd come in here, and I don't know what it is about these former NBA players, these former star point guards, whether it's Doc Rivers or Mark Jackson, Steve Nash or Jason Kidd. It's like these real good starting point guards in the NBA, they become coaches and all they got is defense. Like all they really can preach is like toughness and playing hard and having the respect of the guys. They don't have like no type of like offensive play designs or anything like that they draw up to like get easy baskets, or like the guys who run the smoothest offenses are like Steve Kerr and he's a role player. Like it's just weird. You would think like Steve Nash could draw up a good offense. You would think like a Jason Kidd-led team would be good offensively, but it's just not the case. And I used to always think it was funny when like J.R. Smith was playing alongside LeBron, and he was only shooting like 31, 32% from three some years. And it was like, well, that's because LeBron is swinging it to him with 2 seconds left on the shot clock. And whether the look is open or not, there's a lot of pressure to hit that shot. And you're not in any rhythm because you don't get the ball throughout the game. And now it's just being swung to you, and you got to be ready to lock and load it with the pressure on you to make this shot. And it's just not an ideal situation to be in. Sometimes the passes are off, or they're just not the smoothest in rhythm to just catch and fire all the time. And that's the situation the Mavs are in right now. When the Mavs were playing the Warriors the other night on TNT, I think it was Stan Van Gundy who was talking about how the Mavs shooters are having down years from three, and it's because they're not going to catch a rhythm playing with Luka. When you're coming off screens, when you're playing a motion offense, then your threes are going to be in rhythm. You're going to make your threes. But when you're just standing still, waiting for Luka to finally pass you the ball, and sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't, you're not going to shoot as well from three. It's just as simple as that. So the Mavericks got some figuring out to do. It really starts and ends with Luka Doncic just humbling himself to being willing to play a different style of basketball in order to win at the highest level. Next on the list of most disappointing teams is the Chicago Bulls, and they may be the biggest disappointment. I think there's probably one other team that I'm about to get to that everybody would say is the biggest disappointment, but the Chicago Bulls sitting at 9 and 14, that's 12th in the East. They're 2 games under the Wizards and the Knicks, two teams that just aren't that good. This team will be fortunate to get into the play-in tournament. They can't shoot. They don't make enough threes. It doesn't seem like Lonzo is coming back anytime soon. The last I heard of Lonzo, he was having a hard time walking in his house. You're probably wasted, or I should say, you probably wasted the best season DeRozan was going to give you last year. Like, the best that you were going to get of DeRozan was last season. And they're probably in the worst position in the NBA right now because they're not horrible, but they're also not good. You know, they're in that little spot of like not a threat at all to make a run, but also not bad enough to get a lottery pick. And I think they semi blow it up. And what I mean by semi is maybe like Caruso and other pieces get traded, and they just change the cast around Levine and DeRozan and give that a shot. Who knows though? Maybe they get so desperate as the season goes on that Levine becomes available. I see all these people who do like trade stuff talking about Levine going to Dallas. That would be interesting. Levine to Dallas, Levine playing the Jalen Brunson role, but being like more explosive and a bigger guard who can shoot it. That would be interesting. And the last team to be on the list for most disappointing would have to be the Minnesota Timberwolves. You guys already knew that. Maybe for you guys, it's kind of like with the Lakers being the biggest surprise for me. I didn't think the Lakers were going to be good. So even though they're a couple games under 500, they're a surprise to me because they're finding a way to make it work. A lot of you guys thought the trade for Gobert was terrible. So the Timberwolves being a bust this season isn't that big of a surprise to you guys. But to me, it's been a huge disappointment because I actually thought the Gobert trade was decent. Maybe they gave up too much. I understood when people were saying that, but Gobert is supposed to lock down the inside. And when you have Gobert locking down the inside and covering the mistakes of a young Anthony Edwards, D'Angelo Russell, Karl Anthony Towns, I just thought defensively they were going to be long and they were going to make things difficult for other teams. And then offensively, I thought Anthony Edwards and Cat would make leaps, but that just hasn't happened. D'Angelo Russell, he's kind of been inconsistent this season. I don't know if the coach is really getting through to these guys. He draws up good plays. He's one of these like new analytical, offensive-minded guys. Kind of reminds me of like in the NFL, like the Sean McVays and the offensive new kind of coaches like in Miami with McDaniel. Like he reminded me of one of those guys, kind of like analytic nerd type of guy who draws up like offensive stuff, but they're not really getting through to them. I think losing Pat Bev and losing like that veteran leadership role was kind of a big deal for this team. I don't know how they figure it out. I think that they're going to get better. I think over time they're eventually going to catch a groove, but at best they probably get knocked out in the first round, right? I mean, they did all that and they're not even making a leap, and it just sucks for Minnesota fans to see a guy like Vanderbilt go to the Jazz and just be playing real well. I love Vanderbilt, so it sucks to see him go if you're a Minnesota fan. Even Malik Beasley, like Malik Beasley provided a lot of floor spacing for them. And that's another thing. The Minnesota Timberwolves, it's like they don't make a ton of threes anymore. And they used to be like a 3-point shooting team. It used to be like Beasley and Beverly and AE and D'Lo and Cat. Like they were just making a ton of threes. And now it's like their starters are kind of off to a slow start and they don't really have shooters on the bench. So really disappointing start for the Timberwolves as well. But there you have it, the NBA first quarter recap. I feel like I touched on almost every team in some way, shape, or form, at least name dropped them and talked about them for a second. There's probably a few teams I didn't get to. OKC with SGA balling out has been real exciting. I'm trying to think who else I didn't like at least touch on or talk about for a second. Um, but yeah, those are just the things so far that have stuck out to me this season. Still got a long way to go. I'm gonna be bringing out more NBA videos starting soon, especially once the NFL ends. You guys know I'm gonna roll out a ton of NBA stuff, but for now, I'm gonna try to bring recaps maybe every 10, 15 games or so, and I'll start covering the big headlines that come out in the NBA as the season unfolds. So thank you guys for watching as always. Appreciate you guys. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Share the videos. Until next time, peace.